Hello, how are you? My name is Dr. Marty Martin, and what I'm going to talk to you today about is something that I think is very important, and hopefully you do as well. What it really focuses on is the topic of strategic management. And you think about strategic management, one of the first things that we really have to think about is differentiating strategic thinking from operational thinking. But that really does beg the question is, what is strategic thinking? So let's look at first a strategic framework and see where strategic thinking fits in with that framework. As you will note, strategic thinking is the first thing that has to happen even before you make a strategic decision. And then once you've made a series of strategic decisions, then you wrap that into your strategic plan. And that's when you use tools like SWOT and scenario planning. And then fundamentally, after your strategic plan has been developed, that's when you move towards action or implementation or execution. And then finally, you do a review of your actions to make sure they were aligned with your particular strategic plan. What I want to focus on right now is strategic thinking. Because I think in a lot of cases, we kind of just like brush over that and go automatically, to a SWOT analysis, scenario analysis, kind of, harvesting cash cows. But it really is extremely important that you get the strategic thinking right, because after all, that is the foundation and the driving force for everything else that follows. So what is strategic thinking? We do it all the time. You do it in your personal life. You may also do it in your professional life. So it's something that you don't have to be in a boardroom to engage in strategic thinking. You don't need an MBA to engage in strategic thinking. You don't have to be a CEO to engage in strategic thinking. Let me give you an example from my own personal life about strategic thinking. I was living and working in New Orleans, loved the city, and quite happy and content there. But I got an offer to work for the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health, that's a mouthful, the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health in Cincinnati. So if any of you have been to New Orleans and you've been to Cincinnati, they're a little bit different culturally. New Orleans is a lot more, I would say, fun, a lot more great places to eat. Cincinnati, somewhat conservative, decent places to eat, but not like New Orleans. So I decided to move from New Orleans to Cincinnati. I also made the decision, to actually leave a job that I really, truly enjoyed and loved to something that I really didn't know much about. I had some inklings about it, some hints, but not full details. So let's apply the strategic thinking criteria to that decision that I made, switching jobs and switching locales. First, that decision was largely irreversible because I quit one job, took another job, then I had to move my family to this new city. So there were a whole bunch of psychological costs to that, family costs to that, a whole host of things. It involved the second criteria, a behavioral commitment. I was committed. Because as soon as I put in my resignation and accepted the offer, I was committed. As soon as I, signed the moving papers, I was committed. And there was a tangible gain and loss. The tangible gain is this represented a great opportunity. The tangible loss was miss New Orleans dearly. And it impacted others. It was just not my decision, but it impacted my wife and my son. And it should have been a holistic decision. This is where I dropped the ball, where I didn't do what I really should have done. Because what I should have done is looked at this decision from a family perspective, a geographic perspective, a political perspective, a cultural perspective, a short-term job perspective, a long-term career occupational perspective. So I should have looked at it from almost like a 360 perspective, but I really didn't. I was somewhat myopic and narrow in terms of what I focused on. I think that's one of the reasons, I know that's one of the reasons why it was a bad decision on my part, because I didn't fully engage these criteria. Let's continue down the list for strategic thinking criteria. There was cause and effect. So the cause was, got a great opportunity, and the effect was, I said yes to that opportunity. Then that results in a lot of other cause and effect things related to both professional opportunities as well as family issues. Now, the last criteria is future orientation, but grounded in the past and the present. So what does that mean? as applied to my situation is I made that decision in the present, but the effect didn't happen until the future. So you can see is that we make strategic decisions and we think strategically quite a bit. So the next time you're making a decision or you're thinking strategically, I want you to pause and I want you to review these criteria and say to yourself, if I'm thinking something that is largely irreversible, involves a behavioral commitment, has a tangible gain or loss, impacts others, is holistic in terms of the information that I'm taking in, has some type of cause and effect chain, and is future-oriented, then I'm thinking strategically. And that's different from kind of tactical thinking. Tactical thinking is more here and now. You need less information. It's reversible and not as great a commitment and not as great of a tangible gain and a tangible loss. So remember, you think strategically in your personal life and your professional life. But always go back and check on these criteria. So let's go back. Strategic thinking looks at first and fundamentally the focal point. Then you move to strategic decisions. Then you develop your strategic plan. Then you do an action plan to make that happen. Then you review it. So I hope in this short amount of time that we spent together is that now you know what strategic thinking involves. And then we'll talk later in this series about how to improve your strategic thinking. Thank you very much. And I'm Marty Martin from DePaul University.